I'd like to call to order the special meeting of District 214 Board of Education on Thursday, the 2nd of February. Please excuse my voice. I had some oral surgery, and I'm a little bit hoarse. Would you please call the roll, Ms. Keys?
Heidemann.
Present.
Kreitzer.
Present.
Palmer. Present. Petro.
Here.
Rauch. Walker.
Here.
Dessling.
Yes. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we are at the point of entertaining any public comments. We did not have anybody sign up for public comments tonight, but I will ask Mrs. Palmer to please read the instructions that will apply to comments after, if there's any comments after the discussion item tonight.
Thank you, President Dessling. Public comments. The Board of Education welcomes public comments at this time on non-agenda items. There are also, and we don't have anyone signed up for that, there are also two other opportunities to address the board during the meeting. The first is following each action item Bill, this is hard. The first is following each action item presentation, following board discussion before the vote, and the second is following a discussion items presentation, following board discussion. We will ask later if there is anyone who wishes to address the board on a non-agenda item. We believe in free speech, and as a board and district, we value comments from the community at our meetings and through emails. We appreciate everyone's appearing before the board and treat all with courtesy and respect. The members of your Board of Education are members of your community. They are serving because they believe in the district should provide the best possible education for every student, and they believe they can assist, support, and work towards that belief. They volunteer their time. There is no salary provided for their service. Please offer comments regarding concerns about the district, but please try to present them in a fashion that provides dignity to you, the sender, and consideration of the board members and district staff. The Board of Education asks each person to please limit all their comments to 3 minutes. However, if several people want to address the board on similar topics, the board president may limit the time to 2 minutes per person. Although comments may be made on almost any matter related to the operations of schools, comments will not be allowed identifying individual students or staff members. The board practice is not to respond to public questions or comments at this time. However, we do listen carefully. If requested, a written response will be provided. To be fair and considerate to all addressing the board, the same protocols and procedures must be in place for everyone. The green light indicates your time has started, the yellow light indicates 30 seconds remaining, and the red light indicates 3 minutes have expired. If we had someone that had signed up, at this point we would invite them to the microphone and ask that they clearly state their name for the minutes. Later, if you want to offer a public comment on a different item, we ask that you please clearly state your name for the minutes. If you wish a written response, please make sure that Ms. Keys has your full name and address in order to provide that written response. And you can put that on the sign-up sheet, or you can give it to her after the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Seeing as how we had no one sign up for non-agenda item comments, non-agenda comments for the meeting are completed. And Interim Superintendent Art, your first meeting. Aren't you glad you're here?
Well, it's been an interesting ride over the last 9 days.
I think you and I have been together more in the last 9 days, and you've been home.
That's true. But if I can, I'll just take 1 minute to kind of share my background with the community, because this is the first time I've had an opportunity to be at the board meeting. But I've been in public education now for over 40 years, starting as a substitute teacher and ended up as a as a superintendent and also an interim superintendent. But more importantly, I'm also a resident of Mount Prospect, and my wife and I moved here 4 years ago because we wanted to be closer to our grandchildren. And our grandchildren will eventually be a graduate of District 214, because our kids want a quality education, and obviously D214 provides that. Also, I'm a very proud husband of 42 years, and a father of 3 sons, and a papa of 4.5 grandchildren, who eventually will all be 214 graduates. But also my background, I was also the superintendent of District 300 schools, and we lived through the Sears-TIF debacle. And that's why we're bringing this attention to the community, because the Sears-TIF was not in the best interest of District 300, and it was not in the best interest of the state of Illinois, and it only served Sears in one municipality. Now, I'm not saying that this proposed pilot program from the Bears is anything like Sears. First and foremost, I want everybody to know, as an individual, because this is the first meeting our school board has ever had to discuss and learn about this project, so that everybody's learning as it's being built. But I'm coming from a concerned resident, because I've seen how poorly developed legislation really, really hurts school districts. And it certainly hurt District 300. So that's why we're bringing this to the community's attention. First and foremost, I want everybody to know I am completely in favor of the project. I really want to see economic development take place. This project right now could generate thousands of jobs. I love the Bears, and I want to see this develop. Point simple. I also want to make sure that we maintain good relations with all our villages, including the village of Arlington Heights. That's very, very important. And I also want to make sure that this is properly developed legislation, so it does not hurt our public schools. Because this one, if it's poorly developed, will hurt D214 for almost 40 years. So I have no problems with the Bears. I have no problems with Arlington Heights, but I have a lot of problems with how this legislation right now is being addressed. And it needs to take an opportunity. We need to take an opportunity to say, please let the school districts have a voice at the table. That's all we're asking. Please make sure that the public schools are invited to the table. So that is where I'm coming from. And so now we have asked our attorney, Attorney Arias Dianalis from Forensic PC, Chicago, who's analyzed this proposal. And so now I'm going to turn this over to our legal counsel, who will explain exactly what is being presented or proposed at this time.
Let me just add a couple of words. In the last week, there has been a significant amount of activity and information that has come back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. None of it, at this point, is solid. The legislature is looking at this, and it changes almost every hour. From our perspective, there is no base for us to sit on except what Mr. Hart explained. We want to make sure we are at the table when any discussion takes place about the effect of this project on us and the dollars and finances relative to us. We want to make sure we're at the table. Aries, please.
Thank you, Mr. Wessling. Dr. Aristelianis from the Forensic Law Firm. So wanting to go through, tilt it up, yeah. Aristelianis from the Forensic Law Firm. Thanks for inviting me out tonight. So I put together a few slides that summarizes a 114-page piece of legislation in about 7 PowerPoint slides. So this will be a high-level overview, but hopefully a good education for everybody as well. So this is a very familiar site right here. This is an aerial shot of Arlington Park. So you've got, if you can see the purple lines there, I wanted to denote which taxing bodies, the schools, are covering which territory. So the main track, the grandstands, the parking fields, the dormitory housing, some of the stables, that's all in District 214. North of that east to west purple line, where the practice track is, that's in District 211. So 211 is at the northern triangle part of it, and then there's a sliver on the west side. The other portion, which is really sort of almost a perfect rectangle, that's all in District 214, High School District, and then all of the territory is within the boundaries of Elementary School District 15. So that's sort of the status quo, what's there now. As you all know, the current facility opened in the late 80s. There was an older Arlington Park that burned down in 1985 or so. So this facility has been around now for, probably 30 plus years at this point. So here's that same image with the tax parcels identified. So the red one is what I mentioned earlier. That's Districts 15 and 211. The green one is also 15 and 211. The yellow rectangle and that bluish oddly shaped parcel, that's District 214. And that turquoise triangle in the corner, that's also 211 and 15, but it's actually not part of the overall development. I flagged it, but it seems like it should be, but it's not. But the yellow rectangle and the unusually shaped blue one, those are both in District 214. And then the next image is one of the concept plans that the Bears put forward at their presentation in early September at Hersey High School. So this shows what is currently contemplated for that site. So you can see the stadium would be situated in that northern triangle, which is mostly in District 211 and 15. And then there'd be parking fields to the south and west, some of which are in 15 to 11, but most of which are in Districts 15 and 214, and then the entire mixed-use district, which is going to be, as proposed, a combination of office, retail, some government, some Bears-related training facilities and fitness stuff, and then a lot of housing. And just based on the imagery that's been presented, we don't have anything more concrete than the imagery that's been presented. The housing appears as though it's going to be mostly multifamily. So 3 to 5 story apartments, townhomes, that sort of thing, which you can be confident are going to generate a fair number of students for District 214 once these buildings are constructed and populated. And then, of course, there's the metro station there, so it's going to have sort of a transit-oriented focus to it as well. So let's go through the mega project legislation. So the bill as presented is actually called the Mega Project Assessment Freeze and Payment Law. It would add a new section, among other things, it would add a new section to the Illinois Property Tax Code, Section 10-910. Like I said, it's 114 pages. A developer to avail itself of this incentive, of these benefits, has to invest at least $500 million in eligible expenses. The term is 23 years, and if you follow TIF districts at all, that is also the statutory term for a TIF district, although this can be extended by an additional 17 years to make it a 40-year incentive. So for a TIF to be extended, the municipality has to go to Springfield, they have to get written acquiescence from all the taxing bodies, and then the General Assembly will very often provide a 12-year extension, so 23 to 35. This would simply require a finding by the municipality that, quote, it is a substantial public benefit that the incentive be extended from 23 to 40 years. That's a pretty low bar in terms of getting that extension, and 40 years is a very long term. The applicant needs to go to the Illinois Department of Revenue, that's what IDOR stands for, and make application. Now, the rules will probably be forthcoming. The statute doesn't really provide too much specificity on what the requirements are, but it does refer to rulemaking. So the Illinois Department of Revenue would go through the Joint Committee on Administrating Rulemaking called JCAR. JCAR publishes rules, people comment on them, they're then promulgated. That'll probably put a lot of meat on the bones in terms terms of what the rules are going to be. But assuming it passes muster and the Illinois Department of Revenue says this makes sense, it issues what the statute calls a mega project certification. And then with the mega project certification, the applicant then goes to the local assessor, who freezes the assessment. So like a TIF where the base EAV is frozen, this would be a similar situation. It's defined as the base year valuation, so that would be the value that would allow for property taxation for the duration of the incentive. So assuming it becomes a 40-year incentive, that would be the totality of what you would get property taxes from for a 40-year period. There would be no change in that base valuation. It would be frozen for the duration of the incentive. And you're only collecting property taxes from the base, nowhere else. And then as far as kind of opening it up to the public, et cetera, the local municipality by statute would have to hold one public hearing before they enter into an incentive agreement, and that's a defined term in the statute. The incentive agreement has to include certain elements. It has to include what's known as a special payment. So the special payment is essentially the pilot that was mentioned earlier. Pilot stands for payment in lieu of taxes, P-I-L-O-T, payment in lieu of taxes. So this special payment is just another word for pilot. But the pilot is negotiated by the local municipality in conjunction with the developer. Other taxing bodies like the school districts have no role statutorily in the process. Essentially, you are standing on the outside looking in as the special payment is determined. And then the developer has to commit to operating whatever the facility is for 20 years, at a minimum of 20 years. And then the incentive agreement, and this is straight from the statute, can include such other terms and conditions as are mutually agreeable to the municipality and the company. So that incentive agreement, that's a pretty broad category, terms and conditions. The main thing, obviously, that it includes is what is that special payment. Special payment does not have to be a flat number for the full 23 or 43 years. It can change. It can go up over time. If this were to become law, what that special payment is going to be really important to the board, because you're going to be collecting taxes on a comparatively low value, which is that frozen base valuation. The special payment will make up the difference. And based on what you read in Cranes and elsewhere about, what it costs to build an NFL stadium, say $4 to $5 billion, none of it would go on the tax rolls. It would either be baked into the special payment, or it would simply kind of dissipate in terms of value, and there'd be no access to it. And then once that special payment is made, it's got to be made on an annual basis, more or less aligned with the normal property tax cycle. It's distributed by the municipality within a 30-day period. And like I said, it's essentially a pilot. It's a payment in lieu of taxes. Payment in lieu, just to give you a little history too, payment in lieu of taxes, that's not a completely foreign idea. The most common application of a pilot, though, is where you have a tax-exempt entity, like say Northwestern University in the city of Evanston. There are pilots between the university and the city. So because so much of the property in Evanston is exempt, and the university has many positive impacts, but it also draws on municipal resources as well. So the university works out these arrangements with the city to pay for certain services that they could otherwise say, hey, we're exempt, we don't have to pay taxes. This is essentially a proxy or a substitute for taxes. And then there's a few things here that we don't know in the legislation what the mega project certification would apply to. Will it only apply to the stadium? Will it apply only to that mixed-use district where there'll be a lot of residential? Or will it apply to both? There's no clarity. That'll really be revealed when the application is filed in terms of what sort of geographic boundary, what improvements will be included. And then the other thing I think you need to be mindful of, and Dr. Arndt can elaborate if I misstate it, but my understanding is there is some contemplation of the mega project designation on the stadium and then a very large TIF on the rest of the development. And so obviously that would be sort of your nightmare scenario where you're getting a special payment only on the stadium territory and then no taxes other than the base amount in the TIF area, because all that money flows straight to the municipality. So those are a couple things we don't know, but we need to know more about. At a high level, these are what I think some of the items you need to be thinking about, at least now. That 40-year term is very long. 23 years would be coterminous with a TIF. I'm not sure, and the extension is so easy to get with that finding of substantial public benefit. This is effectively a 40-year incentive. Whoever builds anything, whether it's the Bears or an electric battery plant somewhere elsewhere in the state, they will clearly go to their local municipality, say we need the extension, and they're going to get it. Base year valuation, what's that value going to be? What year is going to be locked in? There needs to be some clarity on that part of it, in my opinion. Establishing that special payment, will you have a voice in that process? I think one thing that the district needs to advocate for is a statutory role in how the special payment is determined. Right now, you are on the outside looking in. So that's not a good place to be with something that has 40 years of consequence to it. What is the scope of the mega project designation? Is it the entire site? Is it just the stadium? Is it something less than that? And then what would be the role of TIF in addition to the mega project? So there's nothing in here that would preclude a TIF in one area and the mega project designation in another. That should be clarified. And then finally, this is going to be going through the sausage-making process in Springfield. I think that the board needs to think carefully about what sort of voice it wants to have. You're obviously a part of different associations, but those associations tend to be educationally focused. I'm thinking EdRed, IASB, et cetera. Think about the necessity for someone who would be your spokesman walking the halls of the state capitol. I think you need that. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions.
So
Hang on
many,
just a minute.
so many.
Ms. Palmer?
Well, I'll get started with some of my questions, but I reserve the right to come back later if I think of others, but I have so many. And, as I was going through the materials earlier today, and the 40 years, really struck me that this is a generation hence that we're making decisions for, and if we don't act carefully at this time. So I think we really need to have strong considerations about that. So I want to just clarify from my mind a few points. So if they make a special payment, that special payment is going to go to perhaps the Village of Arlington Heights, and then the village gets to determine how to use that payment. There's not necessarily, unless we have a memo of understanding or some sort of intergovernmental agreement, there's not necessarily, we don't have a right to say, hey, that's our money, give it to us.
So the special payment, once it's paid to the village, they have to distribute it pro rata, just like a normal tax bill would distribute. So if you guys are, say, 24% of the tax bill, District 15 is 31%, you would get 24% of the special payment, the elementary would get 31%, the village would get 9%, Cook County Forest Preserve would get 1.5%. It's a pro rata distribution once the special payment is made.
Is it possible that the village is going to say, and I live in Arlington Heights, love the village, but is it possible that they could say, well, we need more police officers, we need more fire equipment, we actually have these special costs that we're going to offset with the special payment first, and then we're going to do our pro rata distribution? Is that a possibility?
I do not believe that's a possibility for the special payment. Now, in their incentive agreement or redevelopment agreement with the developer, they may account for those kinds of items and take money out of either a TIF district, if that's ultimately created, or this mega project itself. But the special payment, once it's paid and delivered to the village, they will legally have to distribute it pro rata.
And so, okay, and so then our interests, as I'm hearing you, align with District 25, but not necessarily with 211, because 211 is a different unit, and we may be looking at different things. They might be looking at the special payment things, and we might be looking at a TIF on the other, or et cetera. We don't really know yet.
Right, well, the elementary district for the whole territory is District 15, not 25.
Oh, for that entire territory
For the
is
entire,
15.
yeah, and let me go
I'm
to
sorry,
the
I
image.
didn't
Yeah, no
realize
problem.
that.
So you can see that map again.
How is
Here we
that
go.
25?
So take a look. That blue line that runs along whatever that street is that would go through, right through the bottom of the stadium, that's the demarcation line between 211 and 214. And then on the west side, you can see where we've put in the numbers, the 215, 211 area, I'm sorry, the 15, 211 area, the 15, 214 areas.
Okay.
But all of it's in 15, and then a portion on the western edge is in District 211. And then possibly the stadium, and then some of the residential maybe will also be in those boundaries too.
Okay.
I mean, I think your interests are aligned in terms of wanting as large and growing of a special payment as possible. And then if there's a TIF, I think the TIF would largely be in the 214 part of it.
Okay, so is one of the things that you're thinking we should think about is perhaps proposing some of our own legislation?
Well, I think we should propose amendments to this. Now, my understanding is this has not been introduced yet, does not have a sponsor. Assuming it's introduced and has a sponsor, then I do believe there are many amendments. And that little summary with those 8 or 9 dot points, that's kind of the high-level changes that we are thinking make a lot of sense, that would address the major concerns. There's going to be more and more minutia, but those are the high-level concerns, yes.
And is there a concept here of perhaps a lawsuit versus, and I don't want to get into those types of wrangling and arguments, but I mean, it feels like our tax dollars and our rights to them are being taken away without sort of a due process here. I have strong concerns about that.
This legislation is hostile to the school districts, is how I would put it. Yeah, this whole special payment, non-involvement is a big negative.
And I know there's taxpayer fairness groups out there, and we are not a taxpayer fairness group. However, we have stakeholders are the taxpayers, and they're part of our district. Have we given thought to talking to taxpayer fairness groups about what their thoughts, et cetera, are on this?
I think that would be a great idea. I mean, keep in mind, this was released 8 days ago.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah.
lot to sort of wrap your arms around in an 8-day period.
Sure.
It's been a Herculean effort just to get you all here tonight and to make sure everybody's focused on it and learning, because you're going from here to here.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah.
I do. I spent some time today going, oh my gosh, that's a lot of reading for, to digest statutory reading. Is there a methodology, and I realize you're our school counsel, so you may not know real estate law like this, but I know taxpayers can go and protest that their assessment is unfair and ask for a change in assessed value. Is there a methodology to go the opposite direction, to say, wait a minute, that base year, that assessed value, that's not a fair assessment. We want that we want the assessment. Can we protest a too low valuation?
Absolutely. There's an established practice for filing undervaluation claims with the Cook County Board of Review. And if for some reason, when it's time to set the base year valuation, the consensus is that the value is not a market-oriented number and it's too low, you would have the right to challenge that at the Board of Review. Now, I would hope, and I would think, based on intergovernmental comity and good relations, that base value is going to be set in a sort of collaborative way. But
Sure.
if it is not done that way, I think it's very realistic for you to think about taking that step, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the real question starts to become, what steps do you take at what point in time, so you're not appearing unfriendly or hostile, but at the same time being mindful of what our actual job is, and that's what is in the best interest of the students in District 214, right? And not what's good for the Bears, or what's good for the village, or what's good for whatever. It's our kids.
Right, so, I mean, you raise a good point, Millie, and this bears mentioning is that the only revenue source that the school districts are going to get from a development like this will be the base property taxes as drafted and the special payment. That's it. Now, in the normal course of things, municipalities, which are home rule, have a whole menu of taxes. So when a hot dog is sold at the stadium, when a jersey is sold, when a parking space is made available on a Sunday afternoon, when water and electricity and broadband and Wi-Fi are offered up, it is not uncommon for the municipality to have a tax applied to that. So the revenue sources are really myriad here for the municipality that would be monitoring and creating this mega project, whereas, you know, District 214, you are really very much heavily dependent on property taxes. There are many school districts in Illinois that count on a lot of federal money and state money. You're not one of them.
No, we're not. And so you mentioned earlier that, you know, to get a lobbyist, I mean, I think that's a whole search to find the right type of lobbyist, because obviously the things that we normally would think of using a lobbyist for are not taxing things, right? So
Yeah, so we are doing some research on that to try to move the process forward and provide you with some good choices, just so you're aware of that. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess I have just a couple more questions, and I'll yield the floor. So if there's a TIF being proposed, you have to, and this isn't my bailiwick, so stop me if I'm wrong, but you have to say an area is blighted, correct?
Yes.
And so we haven't had a designation yet saying that that area is blighted. In fact, it was useful until the main business decided to shut its doors. You know, so can you speak to whether or not that would be possibly considered a blighted area, or is that?
Millie, I think it needs 3 criteria
Oh, you're
for a
right,
TIF
Al.
to be
Well,
established.
yeah, and so keep in mind, the mega project is not a TIF. And
But
there's
no,
but
if we're just talking TIF,
Yeah.
it's not only blighted, there's other criteria, but it needs to meet 3.
Right, 3 of 13 to be determined to be a conservation area. So there's 2 categories that an area that might be seeking TIF designation can fall under. One is blighted, and you don't see a lot of that. That's a slightly more difficult designation to get. Conservation area is 3 of the 13 factors, and they're highly subjective factors: deterioration, dilapidation, inadequate utilities, a lack of community planning, lack of air and light, things like that. So that is not part of this legislation.
No,
Yeah.
but if they're only seeking mega project status for the stadium itself, they may seek TIF for the remaining portion, is what I had heard earlier.
That is what we heard based on that last Wednesday presentation. Now, for vacant land, property can qualify on a slightly different, it's not the 13 factors for vacant land, it's a 1-part test or a 2-part test. So I don't want to get too deep into the weeds,
Sure.
but vacant land can qualify for a TIF designation as well.
Okay. All right. I guess that's all I have for this moment, right? There's a lot here.
Okay, next board member. Mr. Petro.
Evening, Eris.
Hello?
All right, so if I understand what you're saying, that if we get this mega project legislation, the Bears or whoever the owner of this property is going to be will pay no taxes on the real estate taxes for 40 years.
They will pay taxes on the base valuation. Whatever that is frozen at, they will pay normal traditional property taxes on that base value. And then in lieu of property taxes above the base, there'll be a special payment. But the special payment will be significantly less than what normal property taxes would be. That's the incentive, that delta.
Okay, so who collects that money?
So from the base, it'll be collected like a normal property tax would be collected. Maria Pappas or whoever the county treasurer is in 37 years, or 13 years, whatever the case may be. People write a check, it goes in, it's distributed electronically to all the taxing bodies. The special payment is distributed only by the municipality.
All right, so I'm confused. Let's say that property is worth $100 right now. And I understand that if they pass this bill, that we will basically get taxes on $100 for the next 40 years.
Basically, yes. The
Okay.
rate may change slightly, but that's effectively yes.
All right, so now over the next 20 years, let's say, the property is not worth $100, it's worth $10,000. So the taxes are significantly higher, right? You're saying that the Cook County treasurer collects the difference in the taxes?
Not
Or
on a
there's
mega
not any
project.
taxes at all?
There's no taxes at all. It's a special payment or a pilot situation.
And that's negotiated by the village?
That is correct, right?
Okay. If the Bears get this mega project legislation and decide, hey, you know what, this is a pretty good deal, but we're going to take Chicago's offer of $1 billion in a new stadium, but this legislation remains in effect for this parcel, are we still stuck with this mega project for 40 years, even though there's no stadium there?
Well, if the law is adopted, it's a law for the entire state of Illinois. And what the Illinois Chamber of Commerce is sort of marketing the bill as something that will help attract these battery plants for vehicles and trucks and stuff like that. But if it becomes law, another user of that property could come along and say, hey, you know what, we're going to make a run at getting the mega project designation, and it's a 320-acre site. It's huge. It's got a lot of potential for a lot of different uses. It could be applicable, Dan, yes.
Yeah, okay. Because I'm sure someone would be willing to develop that, put more houses in there. Wouldn't you think?
It would be attractive for that. It's a good place to live.
But does this designation go from the Bears to whoever the successor owners are?
So so you're saying the legislation would apply to anybody. So if the Bears decide, hey, we're staying in Chicago, we'll take that dome over Soldier Field, they would never even apply for the mega project designation. If they applied and got it, and they didn't spend the $500 million in a timely fashion, it would be terminated. There are termination provisions in this draft legislation. So it couldn't be sold to, it couldn't have been approved for a stadium and then sold to a residential developer and keep the designation. The project would have to change, the application would have to be gone through again.
Well, that's one of the things I was curious about.
Yeah.
Because if it includes residential, all right, so I want to move over there and I buy it, then I'm not paying any taxes for 40 years either?
Well, that's an interesting question, because that's where I think you're going to see a TIF in that mixed-use district as opposed to in the stadium, because the mega project concept doesn't really work once you have individual parcels and people have title to a lot with a townhome, a condo, whatever the case may be. That's why I think the village mentioned supplementing, that was the word used, the mega project concept with a TIF district.
Okay. I guess do you have any idea what the timetable is for this?
Well, what I believe was said on that Zoom call back, a week ago Wednesday was the Bears, the village, the chamber are pushing to get this approved in the current legislative session, which would end, Memorial Day this year. So you're talking February, March, April, May. And obviously, things are moving slowly, but the action happens at the end. So you need to be prepared now for when the action happens, because if this gets traction, you need to, the changes I'm proposing need to be talked about and incorporated.
And as I understand it, the biggest concern that we should have as a school district is the residential area housing a bunch of children that would then use our facilities in our schools, but really not paying for it.
Well, if it's a TIF in the mixed-use district, which is a more likely outcome, I think, they'd be paying taxes, you just wouldn't get them, because they'd be going into the incremental fund. You know, you've got the base and then the increment. As that increment grows, I should have put a slide on TIF in here, too, just to kind of give you that image.
And that's okay, and I get all that.
Yeah.
But you said exactly what I thought. We just wouldn't get any taxes
Yeah.
to support. We might need a new school, we might
Right.
need more staff, who knows, right?
Yeah,
Depending
that's
on
true.
how many children are in there.
Yeah.
And these are not, of course, final drawings or whatever for the project, right?
These are concept plans is what they are. So it's really unclear what that housing is. It's all multifamily. If you look at the images, there's no single-family homes there. So the question is, what's the height? What's the density? I mean, really, what builders are building is apartments now, and that's in demand. And so this would be a highly attractive location. You got a metro station right there, and in a very nice community on pristine property that everything would be new. It'd be pretty nice.
Well, then I would maybe suggest we look into doing a demographic study for that area based on the preliminary plans, because it would be nice to know, you know, just statistically, what kind of growth we may be looking at. Because it's one thing if it's 50 kids. It's another thing if it's 5,000. And I really don't know, because I don't know enough about the project other than, you know, what we've read in the paper and seen tonight.
Yeah, no, that's something that's important to do, and have taken some preliminary steps in that direction, too.
Great,
So,
Harris, I appreciate that.
Okay, who's next?
I have a couple of quick ones.
Mr. Walker?
So we heard from Dr. Arndt about Sears and how it had negative impact on a lot of school districts. Do we have any success cases that Illinois has with mega projects? What's the history on these?
yeah, if it becomes the law, this would be the first mega project in the state of Illinois. This is new territory in terms of legislation of this magnitude. So there literally is not a single example I can point to, because there are no mega projects in the state. This would be new legislation.
Okay, so we're a resourceful state, I'll say, but what state has these that we copied off of?
Yeah, so Ohio has something called, they actually have legislation called mega project legislation. Kansas has something similar, Nevada does. Many states, like 35, have pilot plans, but there's only a handful that have, based on our research, that have the mega project designation, and that they're generally put forward for things like this, where you're trying to attract a massive factory. I don't know, and you know, we might want to find out if it's ever been used for an NFL stadium. I believe it's been mostly used for like manufacturing, and that's how it's actually been marketed. Some of the materials that the Illinois Chamber of Commerce is using are talking about manufacturing jobs. So that's, I think, what at least that angle on it is.
So if we compare it to our neighbors to the north, like where Foxconn went and Amazon, that corridor, how does that relate to what this project is and the success of the tax body up there?
Yeah, so I think that Foxconn project is kind of sputtered out a little bit. That's my
Yes.
understanding, is that there was a promise of a tremendous number of jobs, and it's barely delivering any jobs. And this is just anecdotal, me reading the Wall Street Journal and Crane Chicago Business on a regular basis. I don't know the definitive success on that project. I think it's underperformed dramatically.
Okay. Thank you.
Who's next? Hang on, let me
Okay.
get somebody. Alva Mark? Okay. Really?
I just have a follow-up to something you raised. Have you looked at the other statutes for pilots, for mega projects, and to look at how this statute stacks up? I'm assuming there's no uniform mega projects code out there, but have you guys done a statutory analysis on like where it fits within the codes and how it works and how this stacks up against other legislation?
Not yet, no. We have identified which states have mega project legislation and things similar to that. We have not lined everything up and said, hey, how does Illinois, is it overly generous or under generous in Illinois? How does it compare to its peer districts? That's among many things, in progress.
I realize it's only been 8 days.
Yeah.
I appreciate that very much. And then, so, I think it would be a good idea, though, to look at what's happened in other places, and what has been successful, and maybe we should be reaching out to some of the school districts around places like the Dallas Cowboys Stadium in Arlington, or the Niners Stadium, or, other big stadiums, and ask those school districts, and maybe that's something we do here, to say, what do you wish that you had asked for? And
I like that idea. I mean, because they will have sort of war stories that will be lessons learned, sometimes after the fact, too, so.
right, I know our village has done that with their villages, because they go around talking to different groups about the process and saying that they've learned from a lot of those war stories, but I don't think we've started doing that with the school districts, and maybe we should.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Okay, who else? Did you have any comments? Yeah.
So again, this is the first time our school board has had an opportunity to hear this presentation, and there's a lot to digest. Yeah, this meeting is being recorded, and so it will be downloaded on the District 214 website, available tomorrow. And during the next 7 days, I will be very interested, I know along with our school board, interested in knowing what the public's reaction is so far on this proposal. But at this time, I would like to recommend that the district seriously consider hiring a lobbyist on behalf of 214. And I only say that because I lived that experience that, unfortunately, how our world works, you get no attention in Springfield unless you hire the best lobbyist to work both sides of the aisle. It's very, very important. And it would be a short-term investment and a very long-term gain. But again, we need to hear the reaction from the community, and then a decision will be made whether or not to place this item on next Thursday's agenda, February 9th. That item being to hire a lobbyist to represent 214 regarding the Bears pilot legislation.
So, Dr. Arndt, there are 2 other school districts involved in this?
That is
This
correct.
would just be us going solo for a
No,
lobbyist?
we would want to do it as a joint effort, but we are the first district to present this information to the community, and the other boards will be meeting shortly, so I will be in close contact with District 211 and 15, because we definitely want to present a united front.
Okay. I really agree with you with Ed Red and the School Board Association, because those 2 entities probably track 1,200 or 1,500 bills any given year in the state legislature that has to do with education.
And it's all education focused. That's
Yeah.
why
Right.
I think you need someone who knows economic development,
Right.
knows tax policy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, because I was thinking Ed Red or the association, but now that I'm thinking about it, because they're constantly running
Exactly.
to committee meetings
Yep,
with
yep,
the
yep.
education bills.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to allow public to comment here if they want to. But I want to assure the public, and I want to assure ourselves that we're going to do what we have to do for our students and for the district. We're not looking for a battle with anybody. What we're looking for is somehow to get together and come out with an agreeable situation that we can support and benefits us all. Really, it was 8 days ago or 7 days ago that you first heard of this. I became aware of this 3 or 4 days ago, 5 days ago, when Mr. Arndt and I were discussing this. We talked about it with Mr. Delianis. It's kind of like trying to change tires at 60 miles an hour, or building an airplane while you're taking off. But that's what we've got to do. We will be having Mr. Arndt will be having discussions with District 15 and District 211 We will be bringing this back the next board meeting with an action item, as Mr. Arndt explained, because we want to get an oar in the water. We want to be at the table. We don't want to fight anybody. We want to be at the table and get consensus about what's good for the students in this district. And that's going to take some doing. But we need support, we need assistance, and we'll move forward. Is there any member of the public here tonight that would like to comment? Ms. Bauer? The 3 minutes apply.
Sure. You don't hear this very often. I appreciate all of the questions and concerns that you guys raised.
You're scaring me.
Those are exactly my concerns. Everything that I have been reading about this proposal sure as heck sounds like there's a very strong risk of the village, in its excitement to get a big name project, signing away tax revenue, negatively affecting the schools. I support this proposal to get a lobbyist and advocate for the d214 interests, which are not the same as the Village of Arlington Heights interests. So I want to encourage you guys in that. Thank you for expressing those concerns. The one caution that I would add is that I think D211 has somewhat different interests because that's the stadium side. They're not going to have students. There could very easily be an agreement that works out very nicely for District 211 and causes significant problems for District 214 if we don't get tax revenue that corresponds to the increased costs of having the students. And I can certainly believe that that's going to be a desirable area, not just for singles or childless couples, but for teenagers where people don't necessarily care about having backyards to play in anymore. So, thank you.
This is highly unusual, but I'm going to say to you, we are not drawing a line in the sand and saying Arlington Heights, don't cross over that. We want to have a consensus with Arlington Heights. We want to have a consensus with 211. We want to have a consensus with everybody. And we want to join hands and get through this thing without a whole lot of brickbats being thrown. But we want a place at the table where we can protect our students and where we can protect the district. Anybody else want to make a comment who's in the audience? Okay. Board members, thank you for being here tonight. When Mr. Arndt and I talked earlier this week, and we talked with Mr. Dalianis, we decided we had to have a special meeting, and we decided, Mr. Arndt convinced me that we should do an open session, which was a great idea. And I think we're trying to be as forthright and as, I don't want to say conspicuous, but I guess we are, as we can on this project. Board members, thank you for being here tonight. And could I have a motion, please?
Motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. Please call the roll.
Kreitzer.
Aye.
Palmer.
Aye.
Heineman.
Aye.
Petro.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Dustling.
Thank you for the members that were here tonight of the community. Thank you, Mr. Dalianis, for your presentation. It was very good. And community members that are watching, let your friends know to view this video. It will be on the 214 website if they want to see it. So thank you very much and good night.